Hey everybody, this is Casey Monk with NAMI Central Oregon, and I'm here today with Julian Pijuan, who is a NAMI Central Oregon board member and a therapist. And we're really looking forward to having a conversation today for our new podcast called Mental Health Matters. So, welcome, Julian.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. I live in Bend. Bend's, it's very just healthy. It's wonderful. I was by the river, Deschutes River today, jogging and just taking it in. We got sunshine for December, so take
That
advantage.
is a blessing for sure. I love
Yeah.
it. Well, Julian, thanks for joining us today. And our topic that we're going to be covering is on compassion fatigue. So, can you explain what is compassion fatigue?
Okay, that's a very important topic. Compassion fatigue is typically refers to the emotional and physical exhaustion experienced by those in the caregiving field, okay, or caregiving roles like therapists, healthcare workers, and that's very different from burnout. Yeah, it's distinct. Burnout can happen to anyone in any work environment, right? Chronic workplace stress, monotonous task, lack of management support. And burnout is a broader concept where compassion fatigue is specific to those in the help and in the helping profession and caregiver fields.
Yeah, I bet you see that come up in your role as a therapist pretty often.
Yeah, and my previous career as clinical program manager for a mental health, big mental health department, county.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we really
definitely.
appreciate those folks out there doing that work. And so, what are some of the signs and symptoms of what compassion fatigue looks like for someone?
Oh, well, people in the helping profession, especially people directly working with folks that have trauma, that have some sort of injury, whether it be an emotional injury or physical injury, just like first responders. Um, they often have to focus to help stabilize or obtain information. So when they're doing that and listening and absorbing the experience, they have to put their emotions on the bookshelf for a moment, right? So some of the symptoms come out later. So because they're so focused on getting vital information, they have to really just be black and white in terms of obtaining the information they need to get to help and to provide the appropriate intervention. So how it's going to manifest is it's going to leak out later. It could leak
Mhm.
out with mood swings such as irritability, withdrawing, or feeling depressed, and even more significant is psychosomatic symptoms. So irritable bowel syndrome, like migraine headaches.
Mhm.
Um, physical symptoms like that can come out in the long term.
That's great. Unfortunate symptoms, but it's helpful information to hear how it works. I thought that was interesting when you were talking about, when someone's trying to obtain information in a healthy field, it can be
Mhm.
black and white, which might come across as cold to
Right.
some folks, but it could be a part of that compassion fatigue, just trying to get the information to
So
get
let's,
that
yeah,
person help.
exactly, Casey. So just think about like an ER worker, right? You can have a loved one crying, hysterical, the person suffering physically in front of you, but they need to get going. They need to focus on the vitals. They need to stabilize. So they're just focused on that, and the emotional content is peripheral for that moment. So later on, that experience, that emotional experience, it's like you take a breath and go, whoa, what just happened? Right? Imagine doing that all day, your work day. You're having these kinds of experiences. So, in order to function at a high level, you're going to have to compartmentalize some of those emotions and feelings of that experience. And that's where compassion fatigue is when it can actually occur, is start to mount and build up. And
Yeah,
mhm.
that
And
makes
also with,
sense.
oh, I'm sorry, also with therapists, also with clinicians or children's services, Department of Children and Family Services, when they're out there and they're talking to parents, and you may have to, and you see the children that have been neglected, and they have to be able to assess if the children are at risk. While there's an emotional energy in that kind of environment. So they also have to put their emotions aside and focus on the risk. Are these children at risk at this moment, right? So that's another example of how that happens and how it builds up this compassion fatigue.
Yeah. Thank you for those examples and for giving some jobs that might fall into this experience.
Mhm.
Are there any other professions that are susceptible to compassion fatigue?
Oh, absolutely. Anywhere the profession where the unspoken duty statement requires compassion and caring, they're vulnerable. They're at risk for compassion fatigue. So, bath nurses, home health service workers, volunteers who it's a vocation, right? And doing group, let's say facilitating group, whether it be a bereavement group, whether it be a family support group for mental health. And you just keep hearing these stories over and over and over, and you're obligated to to continue to participate in this kind of service and support. So even volunteers and caregivers that engage in these kinds of support services, they're absolutely vulnerable for compassion fatigue and at risk for it. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up about our volunteers. I know um, some of our NAMI volunteers are holding space in these environments, and it can be a lot. So it's important to recognize and for folks to
Mhm.
take care of themselves. So, how can someone recognize that they might be experiencing compassion fatigue?
Um, that is, it really varies with each individual. However, when you're in that mode, that professional role where you have to check the boxes to make sure that everybody's doing okay and you're going by guidelines and rules and policy, it's very important to check in with your colleagues and coworkers first and say,
Mhm.
how was that? How are you doing? Do we need a debrief? Right?
Yeah.
Um, do we need a process? Because that was heavy what Carol just shared with us, right? Is anybody triggered? So checking in is really important. And then, so utilizing your support people that are around you, whether it be colleagues, coworkers, and then afterwards, when you are at home, your loved ones are going to know your mood right away, right? They're
Mhm.
going to know if you're irritable, if dad's going to be critical about the mess or pointing out things in the house, and why this isn't this done, and making comments and negative comments and things like that. So you can, if you have the ability and capacity to have some humility, allow your loved ones to tell you, "Oh, whoa, 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 what's going on with you?" Right?
Yeah.
What's up with you? You don't you're a little bit sideways. So having the ability to allow others, the people that are close to you, your friends and family, say, "Dude, did you have a hard day?"
Mhm.
Or your partner. So that's really important. But I think it's really important that a lot of these agencies and companies that are in the helping profession to have actual designated check-ins and debriefing,
Mhm.
right? It's very important. Otherwise, it's just going to pile on and pile on, and you can have actually employees call out sick more often if you don't check in about their mental health and how's it going because of all this compassion fatigue and vicarious trauma. So, like for example, if we are doing a trauma narrative for a 14-year-old that has had been abused and neglected, and we have to listen to the specifics of the trauma incident
Mhm.
repeatedly through the weeks, and having to listen to that, that really takes a toll, right? So it's really important that clinicians, and especially in my history, is that we communicate. Hey, how was that? Go to the supervisor, go to your supervisor or your manager to talk about that was tough emotionally. You know, can we talk about it? Do you have space to talk about it? Do we have time? But I think companies should really integrate that into in the work week and a work month to be able to be available for debriefing and processing.
I love that idea. I really do. Like holding space for the debrief and
Hmm.
making it a part of the company culture or the organizational culture. It's interesting also, I think a lot of people in helping fields feel like they have to be bulletproof. And so the idea of like letting down their guard and admitting like, I just had like, I listened to 10 traumatic stories today and
Right.
admitting I'm not a superwoman here. And so I think it can be hard for some folks to let their guard down.
Hmm.
How can we as a community empower those people to feel comfortable to let their guard down?
Or don't feel comfortable, right? But they did it, and they're not comfortable being vulnerable with their coworkers. So
Yeah.
the important thing is to provide that space where others feel comfortable verbalizing and expressing. So then, even if you're sitting in that space and you're not comfortable yourself, you're listening to
Hmm.
how others are feeling. So that's going to actually foster yourself to have some empathy and feel like, oh, I'm actually feeling that. I'm not ready to talk about me or my experience because I don't want to break down in front of my colleagues.
Right.
But someone else can shed a tear and you can have empathy. And then that is the way to pull others to feel, to trust, to have the trust, to be vulnerable in that space. And it's not required. We used to do that where I used to work. We would have debriefings, and some people would speak, but usually most people would end up expressing
Hmm.
some sort of emotion or feeling that they went through with that particular um, story of trauma or yeah.
Right. Thanks for going into that a little bit. So, what self-care practices can help alleviate the effects of compassion fatigue? Because we want to restore ourselves so we can get back into those helping fields, feeling like we've got something to give the world. What can
Hmm.
we do to take care of ourselves?
That's actually one of the things I ask our volunteers when I'm having the chit chat is what's your self-care? What do you do for self-care?
Hmm.
And lean on that, is really to when in terms of like having new staff come on or new volunteers come on, I think that's important, first of all, to talk about self-care, right? And oftentimes you hear a similar type of self-care methods. So exercise, going for a walk, taking a break and go for a walk, even if it's during your shift, having that opportunity to get some air and get the heart rate up, go outside, meditate. Also, people who know how to meditate or try to meditate, so that really helps a lot. So there's some mindfulness there, and integrate your whole entire being into for the moment you take a break or when you end your shift. Um, Integrate it all. That what did I just go through, right? And so what we're talking about here is increasing your self-awareness of your experience. Um, so those kinds of techniques can really help recalibrate your system when you know you're stressed. You can feel the tension in your body, right? So walking is really good, like taking a break and go for a walk around the block and go back to the office. Um, that's very important. Um, but yeah, I think increasing your own chemicals in your brain, endorphins, dopamine by exercise, the outdoors, getting fresh air, that's very important for immediate self-care. And then you have to integrate your routine self-care. What do you do that really is therapeutic for you, right? So if you're cycling, go cycling. If you're a hiker, go hiking. Um, Hanging out with friends and being open with your friends and talking about some of these things and what you're experiencing.
I love that. Yeah, I think if we can do some of those physical activities, it sometimes can be easier to share on a walk
Mhm.
or on a bike
Right.
ride. You're
Right.
loosened up a little bit and
Right.
feeling more comfortable, and those good chemicals are running through us. So I like that. Well, Julian, thank you so much. Is there anything you'd want to add about why compassion fatigue and talking about it is important for our
I,
listeners?
yeah, I think it's a really important topic. As I think mentioned at the very start, when you're in the helping profession, the unspoken duty and responsibility is to have compassion, right? Is to care about another person. Therefore, you have to have compassion to be effective in supporting your client or your patient. There has to be some empathy and compassion, right? So if we don't recognize that we are experiencing compassion fatigue, there's a risk of being coming off apathetic and not caring. And there's no connection with your client or patient, which is vital to stabilizing, healing, um, and for them to be open to receiving more support and services. Compassion and empathy is required in our fields. And
Mhm.
that's why it's such an important topic. If we don't recognize and address our compassion fatigue, we're not going to be providing the optimal service to the people, the target population that we're working with. And that's why it's really important. They're going to suffer. Our work is not going to be optimal. So that's why this thing is really important. The topic of compassion fatigue is really important.
Thank you, Julian. That's a great way to end the show. Well, we really appreciate your time today. And those of you listening in the community, um, stay in touch with NAMI. Expect more of these podcasts to come. Until then, be well.
Thank you.